Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Arvizo Zavala, and I am a curriculum writer and curriculum specialist working with the Utah Division of State History. I have the great opportunity today to talk to you a little bit about the John Jarvie Historic Ranch curriculum that we've been developing, and to specifically focus on the ecology lesson today that's tied to John Jarvie Historical Ranch and the surrounding geographical area, which is often referred to as Browns Park. The John Jarvie Ranch, located in Daggett County, Utah, is an amazing structure, is an amazing place for students and educators, families, and community members to visit. I had the opportunity to visit the ranch in November of 2019 and really fell in love with not only the geography and the place in and of itself, but really wanted to engage and create a lesson that was focused on place-based learning. Even in the midst of winter, at the beginning of winter, November of 2019, it is such a remarkable place. And so John Jarvie Ranch has so much to offer us as educators and as students, and I want to be able to share that with you today. Let me go ahead and start by introducing the curriculum packet specifically. And from there, I will then go into a presentation which will go into the overarching goals and intentions and hopes and ideas that have created the lesson specifically as you'll see it. So one of the things that you'll notice here is here's the introduction to the John Jarvie Historic Ranch, as well as the team of us who worked together to create this. I'm very grateful for my team members. They were amazing individuals who are historians and educators, and this project could not have been completed without them. We also want some additional acknowledgments for the Bureau of Land Management, specifically the Vernal office in Utah, for their financial as well as other resource partnerships that they created with us for the project. And then we also want to give special recognition to the American West Center, who generously supported information and resources to help build some of the historical content that you'll see in the other lessons that are included in this curriculum packet. There's a table of contents provided that will give you easy access to each of the individual lessons, as well as information, additional information such as maps and resources for students and teachers. So let me go ahead and jump ahead to the Ecology of Browns Park lesson. As you can see in this picture here, this is the Green River. This picture was taken in June of 2019. And so in contrast to my visit in November of 2019, it is lush and green and beautiful. The river is quite remarkable. It's incredibly serene up there and a beautiful place to take students to reconnect with nature and to really understand our human relationship to the nature around us. A quick overview of the lesson includes the details of the lesson plan, such as the time frame that will be needed, life skills that the students will learn and intended learning outcomes. There's also a lesson summary, relevant core standards for the states of Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. Then we have some background knowledge for teachers. For me specifically, I had a really wonderful time writing this lesson because I just fell in love with the John Jarvie Historical Ranch and the surrounding geographical area. It is quite a beautiful place. And so when you have the opportunity, please request and be persistent about getting some funding to really visit John Jarvie Ranch, because it'll be an amazing educational experience for you and your students. It's a beautiful place to visit and really worthy of your time. Next, we have some teacher resources. So to really introduce teachers to ecological systems, such as introductions to ecosystem science, overview of river ecology specifically, and then just a brief introduction to the Green River ecosystem, which is located just within meters of the John Jarvie Historical Ranch and the house that's there. So it's a beautiful connection between the historical site and the surrounding ecology. We want to talk a little bit about how the John Jarvie Historical Ranch and surrounding areas, as well as things generally, require our attention and our support and our preservation. One of the particular animals that will be introduced in this lesson is the greater sage grouse, which is an important species to the Great Basin region. Those of us who are from Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada, and parts of California hopefully have a good understanding of the Great Basin and its unique ecological history and needs. Lesson vocabulary is also included here, so please feel free to give students an opportunity a day or two before to become familiar with the vocabulary before you provide them with the student content that has been written for the lesson. The particular activity that guides this lesson is a diorama. And so we used arts-based, scientific observation, which is a term that I use in my classrooms and the educators that I work with and train. to give students an opportunity to integrate art and science so that they really understand ecology specifically. One of the beautiful things about ecosystem science is the interrelationship between all living things, humans, animals, plants, and then also the human interaction with that system, the ways that interactions happen between animals in that system, the flora and the fauna, what plants are needed in order to sustain an organism, or what happens when an organism takes over an ecosystem, and how does that impact, not only the ecosystem, but the things that are there and the animals that are there, and then of course us as humans. So that's the beauty of ecological science. It's really about this integrated, big picture perspective that helps us understand the relationship, right, between and among all living things. Materials list is also included in the lesson. The dioramas are quite easy to make, and there is also a step-by-step instruction guide here that will help your students specifically make the diorama on their own. It's quite simple, and the step-by-step guide will help you create a triangular-based diorama, so it's much smaller, much easier for students to work with. And this particular geometric type of diorama won't require as much time as maybe a more traditional rectangular one that maybe utilizes like an old shoebox or a cardboard box. It's very reasonable, and it's great for students. I've used it in the classroom before, and it definitely is much less cumbersome than trying to get boxes of larger sizes or shapes. As part of the lesson, there are photos here that you can share with your students and present to them in the classroom so they get an idea of the different types of plants in the area around the Jarvie Ranch. This is where they can use observation skills and take a look at the river. For example, it's called the Green River, but as you can see in this photo, it's most certainly not green. But perhaps during other times of the year, it may be green. And that's a question that you can ask your students, and then maybe they could research online. Plants are located here. And then next is the student content. So this is Lexile content, which I'll go over later, that really gives students an introduction to the lesson plan and some of the content knowledge that they'll need to understand it effectively. There's a John Jarvie Ranch extension here, which is another arts-based observation lesson, watercolor. Back in 2017, I had the opportunity to work with an educator located here in Salt Lake County, where we worked with students and took them to one of the bird conservation areas that's located in the city of Farmington in Davis County. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area. We took the students there to do some ecological science experiences ourselves. We did scientific observation as well as some testing. So we looked at pH of water, both close to the shore or puddles that maybe we found near the trail, and then various other water sources at the site. And this is a really great opportunity for students to get an more in-depth scientific look at water and why it's important for it to meet some certain scientific standards as well. And so the John Jarvie Ranch, with the watercolor, we did this activity with our students who were also fourth grade students. And it was one of the most memorable moments for me as an educator to see students and to see how excited they were to try it out. Of course, there was a student or two that got a little frustrated because the watercolor is hard to control, but we also turned it into a learning opportunity for them to see that watercolor, just like the water that we're testing and looking at, has its own behaviors and its own set of properties. So it was a really, really great way to really integrate and hit home some of the ideas of water and the importance of water. So I included it in this lesson as an opportunity and to really just share it with all of you, because it was such a joyful experience for me as an educator and for my co-partner educator as well, and would love to see more teachers utilizing art in their science curriculum as well. The last piece of it is, so there's a materials list also located for the Jarvie Ranch extensions, which are located in these pages here. And then this lesson also has an exit ticket so that you can do some assessment in regards to how the students did with the lesson and how they interpreted it or what they got from the experience. Sample question is, write a text message summary of today's lesson, or what is one question that you still have after the lesson today? As many educators know, exit tickets are a really wonderful assessment tool that we can use to quickly get information from students so that we can improve our instruction in the classroom for future lessons as well. There's also an other resources list here, which have hyperlinks to videos and things like that you can explore on your own and decide whether or not you want to use them in your classroom. And then there's also a list of references that I use to actually create the lesson plan and the content that is presented here. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and transition over to the presentation that I have, which will go into detail in terms of an overview of the lesson and some of the opportunities that you'll have when you teach it and share the content with your students. So as you can see in this presentation, it's really focused on this lesson plan is really focused on the ecology of Browns Park, ecosystem science and river ecology specifically. And we really hope to create a sense of wonder of the Green River ecosystem for you and your students. In this lesson, there are three primary sort of overarching goals or hopes. One is this notion of conservation and protection of our ecological systems. Next is the value of rivers, and then also the connection between humans and animals. So as a quick introduction to ecosystem science, the purpose of ecosystem science or ecology is to help us understand the ways in which various systems interact with one another and influence the trajectory of life within time and space. As such, it is important to note that ecological science serves as a foundation for our students to understand that we as humans have an inextricable connection to the plants, animals, and insects around us. And that's really important, is really for us to develop a better relationship with our ecological systems and nature around us. So one of the favorite parts for me in terms of writing this lesson was researching and getting a better understanding of the greater sage grouse, which you can see in that picture there. The greater sage grouse is an animal important to people, culture, and history. And this lesson will give students a better opportunity to understand the sage grouse. It is a really unique animal and really, really fun to watch in its natural habitat. Some of the videos that are included in the addendum or the additional resources section will give you an opportunity to see those. They're just really, really fun. And possibly showing those videos to students will get them really engaged in the lesson prior to your delivery of it. The greater sage grouse is an important species in three ways. One, it is a species that is sacred to many indigenous nations across the Great Basin. And when I say indigenous nations, I mean indigenous people and Native American people or First Nations people who call the Great Basin home. I myself am an indigenous person, and so for me creating this lesson, it was really about honoring the scientific contributions that indigenous people have made, not only to conservation efforts or to understanding animals and our relationships with them, but just the knowledge that they have to really help us better understand how to manage these ecological systems. Today, across the nation, there are increasing number of partnerships between scientific departments, divisions, and organizations with indigenous nations and indigenous people to learn from and really integrate different forms of knowledge to better support our ecosystem. So that's wonderful. The second part is the greater sage grouse is a unique species that has evolved and adapted to the Great Basin terrain specifically, and is thus a deep reflection of its environment. One of the things that the lesson briefly talks about is the concept of a lek, and a lek is sort of the mating habitat or the family habitat of the greater sage grouse, and that's really important. It's the combination of all the sage grouse that come together. And as the name suggests, sage in particular, and very specific forms of sage, are important keystone parts of the diet to the greater sage grouse. And so as you build your diorama with the students and introduce this content to them, make sure that you talk a little bit about sage and the different forms of sage that the sage grouse uses as food and as shelter and part of their habitat, right? Without these specific types of sage plants, these greater sage grouse are at threat of extinction. And so the changes in the landscape, such as with plants, is part of that ecosystem science perspective. How is everything integrated and connected? And if we lose something, do we run the risk of losing something else, such as the greater sage grouse? Lastly, studying the species has helped me better understand how human behavior influences not only the Great Basin, but also the often delicate relationship between an animal and its natural habitat. So really hone in on that in this lesson and give students an opportunity to understand the important relationships that exist between humans and animals. So part of the content knowledge here is the student reading content, and I have an excerpt from there. As with an additional lesson in this curriculum, this is lexile content and is an introduction to ecosystems. The lexile content, which is more than what's provided in this particular slide, provides students with an introduction to what is an ecosystem, the greater sage grouse, and then the Green River specifically. So here's the excerpt on the Green River. The Green River is an important river to Jarvie Ranch. It winds its way from the Wind River Mountains in Wyoming. Then the river shows up in parts of Utah, where Jarvie Ranch is located. First, I had to go ahead and restart my sound. So first, rivers are dynamic. This means that they change shape over time. During part of the year, they are deep, such as during spring. During another part of the year, they are shallow, such as during autumn. Rivers also have the ability to change direction over time, although this can take many years to achieve. As you can see from this excerpt from the student content, it is geared towards fourth grade, and you can provide other scaffolding supports such as sentence stems in order to help your students access the content. And once again, I can't stress enough how important introducing the vocabulary a few days before that you deliver the lesson is a great way to get students really integrated and understanding what we're hoping that they do. So the ecology case study, or the creating of these dioramas, is a central component to this lesson. As I mentioned earlier, the term that I use is arts-based scientific observation. And it is this partnership between arts and science, and using observation to gain better scientific understanding of the things that students are studying or that we are studying as teachers. And then the arts-based piece is utilizing art to really, create an image in the student's mind of the importance of ecosystems. As you can see in this picture here, which is a picture of areas of the Uinta Mountain, multiple ecosystems in the Uinta Mountains. Imagine being in this place and utilizing observation. In this picture, you can see the mountains in the background and the trees, different types of conifers, right? You can see plants, wildflowers in the forefront. There's a tall plant there that maybe we could use some scientific research skills to identify what is that plant. Is it natural or indigenous to the ecosystem? How about these flowers? Where do they come from? What time of year are we looking at here? Possibly late spring, especially if this is a higher altitude. So that's an example of the questions and sort of the interactions that we want to support students in when they're engaging with this lesson. A quick introduction to arts-based scientific observation, as I define it, is that it's a tool used by teachers to help students remain highly engaged while practicing observation skills that we use in the scientific process. Using photos, content within the lessons, videos, and more, students will make observations about the ecosystem, looking at key components to what makes an ecosystem. Afterwards, students will be provided with materials to create a diorama that replicates what they have and what they think constitutes the plants and animals and ecosystems segments of Browns Park. So one of the important pieces to this and where the diorama comes in is students should really use the diorama to replicate plants, and they can use all different kinds of materials from tissue paper to construction paper. Scissors will be really great for this lesson. Old magazines that may have pictures of plants, that will give students an opportunity to identify plants that maybe closely resemble sage, for example, or another plant that the sage grouse may eat. This information and the types of plants that are included in the sage grouse diet are located in the lesson. And so this is part of the extension package that comes with the lesson as well. So here we emphasize scientific observation, ecological learning, and then of course place-based. I cannot share how grateful my visit to Jarvie Ranch was in preparation for the development of this curriculum and this lesson specifically. Such a beautiful place. Please, please, please take every opportunity you can to visit it with your students. So two important elements to traditional ecological knowledge include using both observations and experiences to answer questions about the natural world. The purpose of this lesson extension is for students to start building connections to how every living thing, plants, animals, insects, and etc., help or hinder the survival of a species. So earlier when I mentioned the partnerships between indigenous peoples and indigenous nations and scientists, Western, trained scientists from organizations, divisions, and elsewise, these folks are coming together to really build on the knowledge that both groups of individuals have, which can both be considered scientific knowledge. Observation is a keystone in scientific inquiry across many disciplines. And so this partnership and the increase in the number of partnerships that we're seeing with Indigenous nations is really, really important. Always keep in mind that the knowledge that Indigenous peoples and Indigenous nations can provide to us as educators and scientists is incredibly valuable. And this lesson hopes to introduce students to the value of that. At the very final end of the lesson are some additional resources, supports for your preparation specifically. And as you access the curriculum, we want students to really think critically. We want them to develop literacy. And of course, we want them to engage in scientific inquiry. This lesson includes relevant standards in science, fine arts, social studies, and language arts across the states of Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado. Additionally, the lesson plan includes a section to develop teacher background knowledge to support successful teaching of the lesson when you do so. Finally, at the end of the lesson, there are additional resources, as I mentioned before, to build content knowledge and to supplement the lesson plan as a whole. So with that being said, that is the end of this particular part of the video. I just want to end with sharing with you, thank you so much for your time today. I believe that we will have opportunities to share contact information, possibly through the Utah Division of State History, so that you can follow up with us as the curriculum writers to maybe ask questions or follow-up questions regarding the lesson plans that we included. And we really, really hope that the passion that we had in writing this curriculum and writing these lessons is transferred to you as an educator, as a teacher, or as someone who works with children and youth in various organizations. We also want to make sure that you see this as an opportunity for inquiry and for really fun integration and interdisciplinary work with your kids. We hope you enjoy it, and more importantly, we hope that you have a great time teaching it. Thank you so much for your time today.